What's going on, YouTube? Second installation, man. Facts over feelings. Like I said, leave your feelings at the door so we can get to the facts. You know, something like this, the gravity of this obviously cannot be done in one part. It's got to be done in like 2 or 3 parts. So I already know before I post this, I took a little breather. And also, I know that at the rate at which these are uploaded, YouTube takes a while. So the second parts you might see a day later or 2 days later up on YouTube, but they're coming. So be patient. So let your brother plead his case before you sit up there and you ostracize me, or you think that I'm just ranting and raving and I'm just sitting up here trying to destroy these figures with towering reputations. See, the thing is that because they have them, and regardless of how they've been propped up to these positions, we cannot question them. And I'm sick and tired of that, man. When the evidence is laid bare, it's laid bare. This is one of the reasons why I said that you have to be evolved in your learning, man. This is why you have to entertain multiple disciplines of and bodies of knowledge. Because if you don't, you're not going to be able to put this narrative together. Is what I'm telling you, is that they had planned this for hundreds of years, man. They was in their laboratories working. They understood the differences between us and them. And the differences were in your electrical fluid, or what we like to call the blood, man. Understanding that they understood you were carbon-based beings a long time ago. So like, let's just kind of finish up and wrap up what we were saying in the first one. The first one was detailing, who these individuals are, where they had went to, who they were affiliated with, who they were educated by, and what their purpose was. Now, the purpose at the end would obviously transcend their lifetime. So what we're dealing with is that this was, like I said, long-range game. And how do we know that? So let's just kind of finish up. We know from what he was starting in 1919, he started the Black Star Line. All right, but by 1922, just 3 years later, due to poor mismanagement and dilapidated resources or dilapidated machinery, everything just kind of fell apart. So, through the snitching with A. Philip Randolph and a lot of the other boule niggas who was getting jealous of the clout that Marcus Garvey was receiving, they end up trying to pin mail fraud on him, and they gave him 5 years or so. So in 1925, he gets locked up. By 1927, he's out. All right, 1927, he's out. He goes back to Jamaica. He tries to, direct the UNIA and maintain stability in that organization. But it ends up falling apart. He goes back to London in around 1940 and ends up passing away. Okay, so that's what he does. Now, mind you, like I told you before, the American Colonization Society and its efforts in 1820 to 1843 to get blacks to go back to Liberia, to repatriate Liberia, were unsuccessful. But that was something that was still nothing new. The British had tried to do that in 1787. They took 300 slaves and tried to get them in Sierra Leone. Same thing happened. The aim of the European was to use us, or the light-skinned Negroes, you know what I'm saying? Because like I said, remember, in Liberia, they were called the Americo-Liberians. They had rank. Now remember that. I'm gonna come back to that. But the point is, what you have to understand, this was about long-range game. Now, so what happens is that they make even further attempts. They know they have to sprout up a figure who can galvanize and get as many of us over there to round us up in order to kill us over some phantom disease. How is that? How will I explain that? How do I prove that? Okay, so when we understand the what Liberia is, or these countries, these free states, or that were freed by slaves, and it's only 3 of them that in recent memory that they count, which would be Sierra Leone, Haiti, and Liberia. Okay, now when he was trying to get blacks to go there, not many freed slaves wanted to go. Before Marcus Garvey, and not too many people wanted to go even after Marcus Garvey, even as appealing as the message has sounded. Because I know, like, regardless, even if this sounds like this is reaching, we know as a people, when we feel something's not right. Now, how do we know this? Now, let's take a look back at the science, and I will show you why a lot of these things are important and why it's tremendously important. Is because during this time, they already, like I told you before, like I explained in some, in a couple of the lectures that I had done, they knew that your blood was different. This idea, like the people talking, they peddle, oh, we the same underneath, we the same underneath. And no, if you were the same underneath, you would be the same on top. Because we understand that, if somebody don't know this is a small chemistry lesson. Melanocytes are what's called migratory cells. Somewhere between, like I said, with the 6th week of the, during the embryonic stage, these migratory cells begin to migrate, and a lot of them settles at, at the interface between the epidermis and the dermis. Okay, and then they become a part of the keratin, and then which is something called melanin dust. All right. And so this is what accounts for this melanin, for what you see. You understand what I'm saying? So they knew that your blood was different. And so they began to continue to keep researching blood. Now, remind you, the first successful blood transfusion was between dogs. Wasn't humans. The first successful human blood transfusion was in the 1800s, or the 19th century, if you will. All right. Now, by 1901, it was this guy by the name of Carl Landsteiner. All right. He's the one who gave you these blood groups, A, B, O. And before like we said, when you hear A, B, O, A positive, B positive, O positive, O negative, A, B positive, and A, B negative, what you have to understand to shorten it up, that positive and that negative means either when it's positive, it says you have that rhesus factor in you. And when it's negative, it says that you don't. But understand this, it goes even deeper. The rhesus negative is simply saying that you don't have the rhesus D protein or the D protein in that rhesus group. Doesn't mean that you don't have the rhesus protein or the rhesus blood group. You have to understand that, because those people who do not have any rhesus blood group at all are called Rh null. It's called the golden blood. You understand what I'm saying? So what happens is like we know, if you know, it's not that you have to have the same blood as somebody for a blood transfusion. It just means that you don't have, if you don't have those antigens, what happens is that they will develop antibodies to. So for instance, if you were B positive, you know, you could receive blood from, you know, anyone that has the, you know, B antigen in their blood, and also O, and O positive and O negative, because O means, just think of O as saying it doesn't have any A antigens or any B antigens. Okay. So when you have those antigens, you don't produce what's called antibodies, or your immune system doesn't flare up and make a response. You see what I'm saying? But we'll get to a little bit of, we're going to refine this and get to this a little bit later too, you know, to bring that concept home. Now, what happens is that people didn't realize that when they say, because we got to understand how to conceptualize this right. When people say, oh, well, you know, you're A positive, or you're B positive, or you're AB, whatever your blood type is, or whatever that blood group is, people fail to realize that when they're saying that, they think that that's what you are, and that's what you know. Even according to the Smithsonian, or you go and you do your research, what you find out and what you learn is that those blood groups break down into even more blood groups, and then there's other blood groups that break down even more blood groups. Like they talk about, it could be millions of blood groups on the surface of your red blood cells, which is determined by your heredity. It's passed down to you. Okay, and so when some people, they would be like, oh, well, the rhesus, you know, it came from the monkey. No, it didn't come from the monkey. That's not what Europeans are saying. So again, let's know their science. What they're stating is that when this guy, Landsteiner, Carl Landsteiner, this biologist from Austria, when he had done this, you know, work, he had realized, because they were always comparing every animal blood. This is what they were doing. They were trying to find out about everybody's blood, everything that they can get their hands on and throw in their lab. They wanted to know what type of blood did it have. You understand what I'm saying? Because little do you know, cats also have the A, B, and O, but their antigens look different, totally different. But they still use the term A, B, and O. You see what I'm saying? But you couldn't put animals' blood inside of humans, which they were trying to do. It's called xenotransfusion. Okay, but back to my point. My point is that, you know, they found out a long time ago in the early 20th century, at the start of the 20th century, they were going on a campaign, because you have to understand that how they were able to take over was by understanding that they had diseases in them that were foreign to our body, and they turned them into weapons, just like syphilis. Syphilis, just you go to the book that was written in 1552 by Bartolome de la Casa. Okay, Bartolome de la Casas, I believe his name is, and I know that's his name. He had wrote a book talking about the destruction of the Indies, and how by 1500, now remember they started selling around, you know, late 1400s, by 1492, you know, around that time. By 1500, 8 million natives of Hispaniola were dead, extinct, due to disease. They knew exactly, in order to take over, it would be through drugs and it would be through disease. You understand what I'm saying? So this is why they were trying to set the stage, because they wanted to take over the continent. What you must know is that the United States don't produce nothing. Okay? They import everything. Africa has all the gold, all the diamonds, all of the resources. You understand what I'm saying? But it's extremely big. Like we talked about, think about the size. Remember what I told you about Europe? Europe being an island, a group of islands, an archipelago. How you can fit all these so-called continents inside of Africa. So this is not a job that would take a year, 50 years, 100 years. It could take 1,000, 2,000. Because first of all, we understand how resilient carbon-based beings are. And so when they're in their lab studying this blood, they know that it's about biological and chemical warfare. That's why you can turn on your TV now and they're trying to spin this coronavirus. Let me go on. Let me show you how they were putting it in place. So, when they had, like I said, tried these things, they tried it. The British tried it in 1787. And then, of course, the American Colonization Society tried it in 1820 between 1843. And they would continue to keep trying it because they knew what? One of the things that you have to understand about when you are, trying to exterminate a people, the biggest thing will be their image. And I don't care what you say. When you talk about the AIDS virus, you have to understand that when you're trying to rebuild the people or you're trying to go back to Africa to rebuild, if you don't have no solution for AIDS, what the fuck you gonna do? Economics is only gonna take you so far because a movement allows you to merge with it's an intimate process. Most people who became involved in the movement end up meeting their significant other there, like Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz. And countless other individuals who, began to develop relationships and codify the movement and create that solidarity that's necessary. How can you create an intimate movement if you can't reproduce with the very people who are like-minded as you? Okay, so they understood biological and chemical warfare. So, before we even go off into that, I wanted to read a couple of, individuals who just randomly, because a lot of y'all don't understand some of these people, and you may know this because a lot of these niggas act like they already know. So some of these people you already may know was a part of Greek fraternities. Carter G. Woodson, he was a part of Equa Psi Phi. Kwame Nkrumah was a part of Phi Beta Sigma. Bobby Rush was part of Iota Phi Theta. Khalid Muhammad, Omega Psi Phi. Betty Shabazz, she was part of Day High Sigma Theta. Huey P. Newton, Phi Beta Sigma. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't care to try to retain that bullshit at these Greek fraternities like that. So, I had to write it down just so that you guys understood what was going on. But when we take a look at, like I said, we're going back to the science of blood and what they had to understand, had to master about it. Now, we already talked about if you had to try to imagine a pie chart in your head about what the blood cell, about how the blood cell, the blood cell's constituents, you would have about 44% red blood cells. This is what a blood cell is made up of. 44% be red blood cell. And then the 55% of that red blood cell will be made up of plasma. And then 1% would be made up of platelets and white blood cells. Okay? And this red blood cell. So, the vast majority of what makes up this blood cell, especially its membrane, is proteins. This is one of the reasons why the doctors would say if you didn't have RH in your blood, that they didn't think that it would be possible to be alive because the RH was a significant part of the cell's membrane. You understand what I'm saying? And so, like I said, so the outer surface of the blood cell is made up of a lot of sugar. You understand what I'm saying? That's why a certain virus, may have an affinity for you or not, because it may be attracted to the sugar that's on the outside of your blood. You understand what I'm saying? It's turned as polysaccharides, so they can be proteins or polysaccharides. But the point being is what we have to understand, is that they were studying this blood, and they, mind you, like we said, how many times, if you've heard of Henrietta Lacks, they would take other people's bloods and make weapons out of them. Because by default, they know that the blood is different than yours. Whether it's coming from monkeys or whether it's coming, from another human. They're researching this. So when they take the blood, the blood obviously has a lipid bilayer, and the membrane is made out of proteins and all of that different stuff. Okay. All right. And so we talked about those antigens and if you have A and B or if you're A and B positive, you can have someone donate blood to you that has A and B in it. And if it's AB negative, or AB positive, it can be, you're a universal recipient. And if it's O negative, you can be a donor to everybody. But but you can only receive O negative blood. Why? Because you don't contain no antigens. Just remember O as being like 0. You don't contain no A, no B, or no RH. D. You contain other RH group antigens, but you don't contain that RHD. And why is that important? Is because you have to understand that the RHD and the A and the B are the antigens that cause the biggest reactions. That's your blood group. You know, your blood is unique. That's because your blood group. That's just because those are the ones that cause the biggest reactions. So they have to make sure, and what they do is when they take that blood, mind you, they take out the white blood cells, dump that in the trash, because they could also contain, like they said, viruses and bacteria, and then the red blood cells they discard too as well, and they take the plasma, so it's technically called a plasma transfusion. You understand what I'm saying? And why these antigens are so powerful is because they cause something called complementary activation. That's a scientific term. So complementary activation is when your antibodies begin to attack them and then start to punch holes in the membranes of the bacteria or the cell, causing its shape for it to change its shape. And that's how that clumping starts. And then that can cause kidney failure, strokes, whatever. It can, a multitude of things can happen and occur from that. So this is what they know. This is what they know. This is what they were researching in the early 1900s. You understand what I'm saying? So when they was trying to get you to migrate here, now the one thing, I'm not saying this first, I got to, offer some, I got to say, look, I'm not saying because, I know for a fact this AIDS thing is a hoax. Or HIV causing AIDS, which has no scientific, literature that was backing it and saying that it could relate HIV to causing AIDS. When Margaret Heckler and Dr. George Gallo had announced it on the news in 1984, there was no review by their peers, by the scientific community that said HIV had caused AIDS. You have over 600 scientists, most with advanced degrees, are saying that this is a retrovirus that can't cause AIDS. You understand what I'm saying? But they were already planning for this. They were gearing it up. They first came up with this idea, the retrovirus, by 2 virologists. One was a Japanese guy by the name of Satoshi Mitsutani, and the other one was an American virologist by the name of David Baltimore. So in 1970, they constructed this shit. It was like, it's a retrovirus. And what do retroviruses do? Retroviruses work in reverse. So quick chemistry lesson. So when what the retrovirus does is it's saying that RNA is its genetic material, not DNA. So somehow it sneaks inside the cell cytoplasm, then creates DNA, gives it into the nucleus, then the DNA starts to make RNA, then starts to make protein. Because they work in reverse. They make RNA, then make DNA, then make RNA to make protein. You understand what I'm saying? Because DNA is made in the nucleus, and the RNA is made in the cytoplasm, then it begins to make proteins. All right? So, like I said, that's how that disease begins to spread and become infectious, they claim. But all the research out there indicates that HIV, it's like 1 HIV molecule per, 1,000 T cells, or sometimes even 10,000 T cells. Because the idea or the myth was that HIV kills T cells. It doesn't. T cells are your messenger cells, which inform your B cells, which is your killer cells, that you have antigen in your blood that needs to get rid of, and that's what it causes. But then also, like they said, there is no such thing as a slow virus. You understand what I'm saying? So the fact of the matter is that that's what they did. In 1984, there was the incubation stage of about a year. They was like, in about a year, you start falling sick and dying. Understand what I'm saying? And then, at this point in time, currently, you could have, HIV for 5-10 years or your whole life. That's the only virus that breaks that rule. They had to cause it to mutate, to hibernate, to incubate, all of this great, crazy stuff. Because any other virus don't operate like that. If they go shoot you with the flu virus right now, it doesn't have an incubation stage of a year. Imagine a doctor or the pharmacist telling you, I just shot you with the flu virus, but you might get sick a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now. That viruses don't operate like that, man. So that's what I'm saying. We don't know science, but we all sitting up here talking about, if you talk to a person in the conscious community, most of them will tell you, like, if this in a top 5, type 10, that AIDS is affecting the black community. But what if it's the greatest medical hoax ever perpetrated on the people, specifically black people? Okay? This is why I'm pissed off, because y'all not putting the science together. Leave your emotions out of it, man. So when these people were trying to get us to go to Liberia, you understand, and all of that turmoil, because then Charles Taylor becomes elected because he was under Doe. But remind you, Charles Taylor, now we're talking about Liberia right now. Charles Taylor was from that lineage of the Americano Liberians. His dad was a judge. He was from the aristocracy. They plan that. That's what I'm telling you. These boule niggas, they the ones who get all these appointments in our revolutionary movements. It ain't you, nigga. You understand what I'm saying? So, you know, like I said before, man, the HIV, look, for instance, I'm gonna name you some countries. If they weren't trying to eliminate this continent, then I'm finna tell you the top four countries for AIDS, bro, is Swaziland. They say Swaziland, it has 20% of its people that are infected with AIDS or infected with HIV. Second is Lesotho. Third is Botswana. Fourth is South Africa. Oh, you want more? Now we're going to take a look. When you look at this off the World Atlas, when you take a look at this information, then you're going to wonder, okay, now these the other countries next in line for the highest in HIV infection. I want you to just count in your head how many of these in Africa. It may be one or two, that's not, but I want you to start counting for yourself. Zimbabwe, Namibia, Zambia, Mozambique, Malawi, Uganda, Equatorial Guinea, Tanzania, Kenya, Central African Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, Bahamas, Nigeria, Rwanda, Congo, South Sudan, Chad, and a couple other countries. Out of all of those countries, how many of those countries were African? Because they were there to try to eliminate you. Because see what I said before, if you can tear down the image of an individual, you can justify eliminating them. This is not just a phantom disease as they talked about. We know it's about tribal warfare, dictatorships, totalitarian regimes, neo-colonial tactics that are implemented and that are guided by the people that they are set forth, that are in the boule. But you attracted to this message because, this nigga probably doing for black folks. And then fast forward now. Sierra Leone, Haiti, and Liberia are the most war-torn areas to this day. You thought if you migrated there a couple years, or your family, your grandfather there, that it would have been different? That they wouldn't have released AIDS on you? And like my man said, how does a disease know what country it's in? Here in America, it affects people, HIV affects men 9-1. The risk groups is a little bit over 60% are homosexual men. 30% of those are IV users. And you have those who are, then a small percentage are from hemophiliacs and then those from blood transfusions. Okay? Now, if an epidemic is to evolve into a pandemic, it must birth itself outside of its risk groups. You can't be in the same risk groups for the last 20, 30 years. How does it know, or who does it know where it's infecting? Out of all of those countries, were any high list European countries? Please tell me I'm wrong. You're not getting it. You understand what I'm saying? So when I talk about this, people have to understand, man, it's because this is well researched, man. This is strategic on their account, man. You have to understand that. You think that I'm just blowing this out my ass, and I'm not. That's the furthest thing from the truth. So what I'm telling you is that they were trying to encourage you to go to this land so they could kill you wholesale. And they're doing it now. It doesn't matter. All I'm saying is if you believe that HIV caused AIDS, then you will believe anything they say because your worldview is dictated by their science. And this, you got over, like I said, 600 scientists that I know of that I've researched, and the names that popped up that I don't want to commit to memory, but they're there. And some of them have advanced degrees. You understand what I'm saying? And have all stated that this is a hoax. Dr. Wilner had, in 1993, visited a hotel in Philadelphia for a lecture. He wrote a book called The Deadly Deception, and he had already, hold on, Playboy, let's sit it down for a second. It's already late, so you need to be asleep. Had a lecture where he had already detailed that the tests were unreliable. There was no universal test. It was authenticated and legitimized by the media. There was no science backing it. He was paying $100,000 to anybody who could prove that HIV caused AIDS. You understand what I'm saying? And then like the drug that they were prescribing for it, which was AZT, that the federal government put a ban on it because it was killing cancer patients. Okay, so they lowered the dosage, and then like the guy said, like Dr. Wilner said, he said, imagine that, a drug worse than cancer. So they lowered the dosage after they were giving it to AIDS patients at a high dose to make it appear, oh, look, they're dying fast. And so they lowered the dosage and like, oh, you can live with it. But they understood that AZT, what was causing AIDS. Most retroviruses cause no harm. The average healthy person has between 50 to 100 retroviruses inside their body. But like my man said, he said, think about this. He said, you know, in Europe, it's leukemia, it's tuberculosis. It's all these other things. You get what's called a charitable diagnosis in a European country, but in Africa, it's 3 symptoms. You got AIDS. And mind you, like I said, you become an outcast among outcasts. We cannot deal with reconstruction. We cannot deal with revitalizing the black race until we can deal with this epidemic, supposedly. Because your future is in the next generation, and if you can't reproduce with your woman, if the woman can't reproduce with the man, how you gonna do nation building? Okay? Africa has been devastated by this phantom disease. Like they said, the worst, one perpetrated on man. As far as a hoax is concerned, with no science backing it. But because we didn't do the research, or we don't have them brothers out there doing the research for us, we don't see how all of it ties in. Getting you to go back to these areas to where they can kill the image, assassinate the character, so that they can justify your disposal. And they're doing it now. Just that disease alone, I don't care how much you love somebody. If somebody say for instance, if like we know about zombies, I don't care how much you love your mom or your dad. If they turn zombie, what can you do? If somebody gets that disease, what can you claim that you can do for them? Because you bought into this idea that a businessman who called himself a scientist came up with and said, oh, well, okay, I want, a virus to be the cause of AIDS, when they knew what caused AIDS a long time ago. Acquired immune deficiency syndrome, it's a general term. It's when the immune system is suppressed or it breaks down. But the number one reason for AIDS has always been and will always be malnutrition. But you don't know that. So you sit up here talking out the side of your mouth, not understanding how complex it gets when they develop and craft their agents and when they educate them. Trust me, man, if you're a revolutionary, you ain't going nowhere near the Rothschilds institutions. You don't even want to be a part of that. You understand what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is that these people tried to get, like right now, I'm thinking, and you have to think to yourself, if it was that attractive, why didn't a lot of people go? They saw what happened between 1820 and 1834. You understand what I'm saying? And then so when it went, Zion, calm down, baby boy. Then when they had another opportunity to go, not many of them had left. You understand what I'm saying? Simply because they knew that the white man was going to bring out something that none of us was ready to deal with. Simply because that's the reason why they didn't. Why you think it went hand in hand with not keeping us educated and making us be distant with science, and that we didn't want to know nothing about science. All we wanted to know was how to get a job, how do we do things marginally so where, it could appear to be we got some sense of solidarity, but truly and mostly, most of us are still out for ourselves. That's just how it is. So, this is one of the things, like I said, that upsets me, is that we really don't understand, how in-depth this plan is. And this is a plan of extermination. You understand what I'm saying? So when we talk about, like, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but we talked about syphilis, and we go back and we understand that this disease was called buba. So let's go back over that again. We have to reiterate a lot of these concepts. The Spanish already had a name for it in the 1500s. Then they trying to blame it on some bodies that they found in Central America that contained syphilis, and possibly the Spanish, when they went over there, they got it, then brought it back to Europe, and then brought it back to the New World. Get the fuck out of here, man. You know what I'm saying? Bartolome de las Casas had already documented that in his book. And also, we know that the Italian physician Girolamo Fracastoro was the one who changed the name to syphilis. All right? And that was in the 1500s. So any experimentation that you had witnessed that we had experienced and went through in the 1920s all the way up to date, was they had already had experience with this disease. They already understood the importance of biological and chemical warfare. You thought it started with smallpox and the blankets and the Indians and stuff, and you just left it there? This is what I'm telling you they're adept at. Many of the times that the information is exposed, think how long they work in their labs before they expose it. Our communities have been devastated by this because you fail to understand, and we all realize this, that a big part of nation building is being able to sexually reproduce. And if there's a stigma attached to you that I can't reproduce with you, how is that going to happen? You understand what I'm saying? So stop looking at this event as being one-dimensional. You have to know that, man. So all these people got their feathers ruffled, and I got the last part coming, and this is going to be just as hard, man. And we're going to talk about the many ways that, and who culture is done, who's really specifically a part of all of this that allow, these things to be ushered in as rapidly as they have been. And one of the reasons as to why we can't do anything about it is because we don't want to know science. So I'll be, part 3 going to be coming right back at you again too. I'm out.